विनायको, सम्मान्य मंच, विश्व विश्रुत विद्वज्जन एवं रामायण के सुधी साधकों को मेरा नमन। जो मैं आलेख प्रस्तुत करने जा रही हूँ, सर्वप्रथम ये बता दूँ कि वह एक जॉइंट एफर्ट है मेरे साथ मेरी सहयोगी डॉक्टर रिंकू वढेरा। इट्स अ जॉइंट पेपर। ये पेपर डॉक्टर अखिलेश गुमास्ता की कृति हिम्स ऑफ द हिमालयाज पर आधारित है। ये उनका अनुवाद है और कविवर रवीन्द्रनाथ ठाकुर जी का कहना है कि अनुवाद करना एक इत्र की शीशी से इत्र को दूसरी शीशी में डालने के समान होता है। रस वही, गंध वही, रूप वही, लेकिन पात्र बदल जाता है। ठीक यही हुआ है हिम्स ऑफ द हिमालयाज में। वर्ण, अक्षर, शब्द, भाषा अन्य हैं, किंतु आत्म तत्व वही रहता है। इस बात को सिद्ध करने के लिए मैंने प्राचीन दार्शनिक लॉन्जाइनस की थ्योरी ऑफ सब्लिमिटी का इस्तेमाल किया है। लॉन्जाइनस सब्लिमिटी की थ्योरी में 5 सिद्धांत बताते हैं सब्लिमिटी के, जिन्हें मैंने हिम्स ऑफ द हिमालयाज पर जिनके मन में जिनको रखते हुए मैंने इस महाकाव्य का अध्ययन करके ये स्थापित किया है कि यह भी एक सबलाइम वर्क ऑफ आर्ट है। उत्कृष्टता की ये एक नई श्रेणी स्थापित करेगा आने वाले समय में। With the permission of the chairperson, I now proceed to the presentation. Before I proceed, it would be in place to speak about what is sublimity. So for some moments we shall be deviating from the Ramayana and talking about sublimity. I would like to induct the audience into the concept which I shall be taking. Sublimity is the image of greatness of mind, both in content and in style. We are all familiar with one version or the other of the Ramayana. और sublimity की जब हम बात करेंगे, I would request all of you to keep in mind any one version of the Ramayana and keep applying whatever I am speaking about sublimity to your study of the Ramayana, and then later on we shall apply it to the hymns of the Himalayas. To quote Longinus, Longinus says, "For our soul is raised out of nature through the truly sublime, sways with high spirits and is filled with proud joy as if it had itself created what it hears." The theory of sublimity speaks both for the written word and for oratory. What is sublime shall remain sublime. Yesterday on the stage we saw some sublime performances on the Ramayana, although it was not the written word, but it was sublime. So what happens when we read a sublime work is that the distance between the reader and the writer narrows down. We become one with the chetna or the consciousness of the writer. Who is Longinus? Longinus is a very, very ancient Greek rhetorician. Even his first name is not known to us, so he's often referred to as Pseudo-Longinus. And he wrote a treatise in Greek language which is called Perihypsis. The meaning of hypsis is to take to a height, at a great height, and that is what we are going to keep in our mind, to take at a great height. How does sublimity come? Sublimity comes through nature and art, a happy fusion of nature and art. Nature is what one is born with, art is what we acquire. So for writing a Mahakavya, an epic like the Ramayana, one has to have it within and one has to acquire it. And also for a translation, when the two combine, that's nature and art, the result is true wit is nature to perfection dressed, what oft was thought but never so well expressed. Literature is all about what and how. We are not concerned with what, we are equally concerned about how it is said, because it's the how which is going to create the effect of sublimity. The combination of what plus how gives us great literature. There are 5 principles, I said, of sublimity. To go very quickly, the first is grandeur of thought. The second is capacity for strong emotion. The third is figures of speech. The fourth is nobility of diction. And the fifth is dignified composition. Now, at the top is the man, that is the writer. He has to be a great soul. He's emotionally charged. He feels strongly about something. That is, he should have grand thoughts. These result in figures of speech. The figures of speech are expressed through great diction, and all this results in a dignified composition. Sublimity cannot be gained through a trivial commonplace subject. A sublime work cannot be written on a commonplace subject. We'll all agree on that. It requires divine frenzy, the desire to create something which is beyond time, the desire to create something which is going to live eternally. And in writing of sublimities, Longinus talks about religious texts. He says the characters cannot be ordinary mortals like you and I. The characters have to be gods and demigods and supernatural beings. And it is in this context that the idea of establishing sublimity in the Ramayana came to our frame of mind. And in the Ramayana, we have Ramji, we have Sita, we have Hanumanji. We saw great thumping performances on the stage yesterday. Colossal power in the characters, and that is the first condition of sublimity, and that is already met in the hymns of the Himalayas. The function of sublimity is to instruct, to delight, and mainly to transport us, to carry us into other lands. It also illuminates us with practical wisdom, as we shall see towards the end of the paper. To be sublime is the ultimate justification. It must lift our emotions, and it must lift our mind and soul. The word soul is very important. Now we come to the text per se, that is the hymns of the Himalayas. It was a slow process. We are fortunate that I'm talking of a text where the author is sitting in front of me. In an interview that has been published in an international journal, he tells us that it was a slow process. It was a process of contemplation, meditation, discussion, which finally culminated into the Ramayana that we hold in our hands today, into the hymns of the Himalayas, mainly based on Tulsi Das's Ramcharitmanas. So it was actually on the part of the writer reading, which was a passion, urge to explore divinity, and primarily to convey a message. The Valmiki Ramayana and the Adhyatma Ramayana were studied by him, and he tells us also in the same interview that from class 8 he had been imbibed into. He grew up in a Ramayana-rich culture. He had imbibed the Ramayana from his father, and the Ramayana was a part of his mental makeup, and that was the time. He was also very impressed by Tennyson, by the Victorian poet Tennyson, and by the philosophy of Swami Vivekananda, and that inspired him to create the magnum opus in another language. And he says he had to amplify his imagination, as he writes, "Bhakti, the very treasure of my motherland, I do share with the language of aliens." Coming to the sources, the hymns of the Himalayas, the ability to form grand conceptions. With all due respect to Dr. Gumasta, I would say the first condition was already handed over to him. The grandeur of the Ramayana cannot be questioned. So the theme, the subject was already with him. He had it from the great masters whom he was emulating. So the first source is beyond question. Emulation of great masters who illumined his path, standard of perfection, noble thoughts, good language, and grandeur is the effect. The stimulus of powerful and strong emotions. Combined 900 verses. We have all seen what we've been given is actually not the original. The original is huge. To write something, to compose something of that nature, one requires strong emotion. He says, "May it be an unlettered poesy, yet show its piety of a devotee." To stand the test of sublimity, he had to be inspired so much that in the preface he says, "Sometimes I think how wonderful it would have been if I could have lived as a monk in the forest watching the wandering Ram, or could have lived as a monkey in the army of the warrior Ram." This was the passion which initiated the hymns of the Himalayas. He goes on to add, "Its substance keeps it ever above, for it's impregnated with faith and love all in uppercase." These are the two driving emotions that are impelling the writer to compose something which is going to be sublime. Appropriate use of figures of speech. the language of emotion gets charged. When one is emotionally charged, one doesn't talk in plain language. One talks through figures of speech. And according to the great master Longinus, figures of speech like adjuration, rhetorical question, asyndeton, hyperbaton, metaphor, and simile is what can make even an ordinary work look very great. And for any work to be sublime, we cannot say things directly. Even in art, in the later ages, Robert Frost says, poetry is saying one thing, meaning another. All poetry is metaphor or it is nothing. So we find a happy blend of all the figures of speech. I can say you can open any page of the hymns of the Himalayas and we will find examples and illustrations of all these figures of speech that enrich the language of the hymns of the. To give you an example of adjuration, which is an address, when Hanuman is on his journey to Lanka, the ocean god asks Mount Menak to rise up. O gold, thou canst go down and up. To comfort Hanuman, I prompt thou to rise up. This is a beautiful example of adjuration. Monkey is low, so much so for our name. If one mentions a peep of eastern hail, his full day will sure go without morsel. Prat le jo naam hamara, tehi din tahi na mile ahara. This is how every verse has been translated with effect. Extraordinary brevity and economy of words. There is a lot that an epic requires to be written, but it is to be condensed. It is to be condensed, and it is to be condensed in very effective language. Now when Hanuman sees Sita, takes a tiny form, the condition of Sita, everything compressed in just 4 lines. Kapi saw under tree was sitting the mother, capital M, like the scorched heap of holy thing in altar. So much expressed through economy of words. Dipped in perpetual moan, leaned she to the bones. Seeing her with her sorrows alone, Kapi then much moaned. Now, there are instances when we see a lot of inversion happening. The poet even takes poetic license. There are certain places when the rules of grammar are broken. Longinus tells us that this happens because of the divine frenzy. The poet is given the license to write as per his emotions, because this poetry is written from the heart to be enjoyed by the heart, not by the rules of literature. Then the subdual, I would like to focus the attention of the intelligentsia to the subdual of the ocean. There has to be excellent play on words. Look at the excellent play on the word beats and beast in this couplet. Drums be battered on beats, dames be ushered on beats. The use of beats in 2 totally different ways. Army of a beast needs a different beat. Now these instances are what contribute to the kind of sublimity that I am talking of. The 4th and the 3rd condition, sources of sublimity, almost overlap. The 4th deals with right use of words, diction, poetic diction, and the use of imagery and metaphor suitably to convey practical wisdom. Look at this. With such a grit, wit, spirit, the success is at hand. Wishing this, she took leave. Go and fulfill Ram's errand. I think there can be no better example of poetic diction. Now, for comparison, we have all been sitting here since yesterday, and we have been in the company of some great saints. And Tulsidas tells us, "Bin Hari Kripa mile nahi santa." And Dr. Kumasta says, "Nor nirvan, nor the heaven can bring that delight. What with communion of saints is gained in a trice." And that is what we have been gaining. There is use of metaphor everywhere, even in the chapter headings, the subtitles of the chapters. Now, most of the examples, as you've noticed, we have taken the lens through which we have looked at the hymns is the lens of the Sundarkand, because that is the Kand that we are all so much familiar with. And one of the sections is called the Ravenous Ravan. Wealth of wealth is wealth when mind is set on right. Evils and wrongs ever end in veils otherwise. Wrongly in wrongs your mind finds joy. In bad you sceptered hand is employed. He's using metaphor to give the wisdom of the world in 4 lines. He's using similes, saying that a life sans Ram is like a river that is without water. The 5th effect is a cumulative effect. dignity, and elevation. Individually, the four sources may not have enough meaning to make a work sublime. But when combined judiciously, they can result in a dignified composition. And that is what the Hymns of the Himalayas is. When the writer writes, he does not write with aims of sublimity anywhere, even at the back of his mind. It is we, the readers, when we sit on the pilot seat, that we decide that a work is sublime or not. So the work was not written for sublimity, but the words begin to have a mantric quality. We get flown in bhakti bhav, and that is what is the example of a great soul behind the work. Incidentally, sublimity is the only theory which gives equal importance to the character of the writer. It's only when the writer is morally upright that he can create a sublime work. Now, for dignity of composition, I can give two examples from the Sundarkand, one from the beginning, one from the end. Ram kaj kin ho bina, mohi kahan vishram. For me who goes on Ram's errand, where is the need for rest? Dignified in content, dignified in style. Me, Lord, then one from the end, and the ocean god's ego has gone and he rises up. Sabhe sindhu gayi pad pag kere, kshama hunat sab avgud mere. Dr. Gumasta writes, me, Lord, forgive me, save me, earth, ether, air, water and fire, these are thick by nature, O Master. This is sublime poetry. This is sublime poetry too. Rammed with rummaged riches he saw the mansion, Ravan's greed reflected in his pomp of mammon, sunken in the sunken pool of cut of the gold, deep slumbering Raman, Hanuman did behold. There is music, there is rhythm, there is rhyme, and that is what makes it sublime. What is the relevance of the Hymns of the Himalayas? It's too recent a work, it's only been 7 years. But today we live in a world where borders, geographical borders, are turning into shadow lines, where English stands as the lingua franca, the girdle which holds the world together. And the purpose of the Ramayana is not just to remain restricted to to the Asian countries or to any one nation. The word has to spread, and the word has to spread beautifully enough for it to reach minds, hearts, and souls, as I said. So the message is spread far and wide. Pray to Ram, he will forego your sin. One who faces world rancor, he saves even him, whose very name overthrows three throws, had descended as Ram, brother, you know. Coming to the conclusion, Longinus says, a sublime text is a text which pleases all and pleases always. And that is what the hymns is going to do. It is a timeless treasure. The pages of a sublime text never grow pale. They remain fresh. And we hope that the hymns are going to remain fresh because the inspiration and the passion is directly transferred when we go. The text is laid aside, but the passion continues, and that is a work of sublimity. Longinus talks of false sublimity also. He says if there is any kind of triviality in a work, if there is use of bombastic words or images as decorations on a Christmas tree, then it is pseudo-sublime, it is false sublime. So in my reading, in our reading, Dr. Vadera and I did not find any such false sublimity. So it is a truly sublime work. It expresses rare Catholicity of vision. And in the same interview that I referred to, which has been published in 2014, when he was asked about the purpose of writing and translating, it was a long work of 7 years. He says 20 hours a week on an average for 7 years. It was a sustained effort of 7 years because he wanted the message of oneness, truth, and dharma to spread from India. Let me quote him. He says, may the fragmented world be cemented by the spirituality of India, the very principle of oneness. The epic lessons. The Ramayana is not just a saga. It is a compendium of treasures that need to reach the soul. It admonishes, Kam, Krodh, Mad, Lobh, Sab, Nath, Narak ke Panth. If it admonishes, it also consoles. Ta par koi adham nahi, ja par tum anukul. All these lessons contained in one have to be transferred. The beauty of the language has to be retained, and also the truth has to be retained. Where souls turns to slave of pomp, it's worth not to dwell. Lest from heaps of false amples soul falls to the hell. O friend among friends, how do you reside, keeping virtues among odds is noble pride. So many diversities in perception, so many diversities even in the tale, so many different angles of looking at the Ramayana. The task was Herculean. It all had to be dovetailed into one text, and he has succeeded in doing it. Now, the effect of the sublime is willing suspension of disbelief. There are so many passages of hyperbole, exaggeration, which read like fiction. It's not easy for us. If we employ the rational mind, we may not be able to believe what we are reading. But what a sublime work does is willing suspension of disbelief. We agree to disagree with the writer if the writing is powerful. And the writing is so powerful, we don't wait to question. Ours is not to question because we are enthralled. It's a great soul. And the sublime effect is reaching the soul of the audience. And this is, a setu is being built between the reader and the writer. And that is where the sublimity actually resides. The beauty of the closing couplet, I think, will be able to sum it all up, all that I've been trying to say about the sublime. Keats says, a thing of beauty is a joy forever. The Sundarkand ends with the lines, the one who is ever dipped in bhakti, waves of rampions, they, the blessed one, without ship will cross the mundane ocean. On this very positive note, I end. Mangal Bhavan Amangal Hari, Uma Sahit Jahi Japat Purani. Thank you very much.
Dhanyavad, Professor Dr. Neelanjna Pathak. I am Dr. Rinku.